run into really a lot of families that there's some different scenarios where they want to be either added to the title, and a lot of it wants to be during the process because they have a little bit of a fear that since they're not on the loan, even if they're a spouse, right, that they're concerned about that. And we'll talk about that because that kind of happens automatically. So kind of quell some fears about that. But then sometimes it's other family members that want to be a part. They're not on the loan specifically, but they want to make sure they have some vested interest in the property. So talk through to us and through some of these issues and the pros and cons of doing this.
Yeah, so if you want to add a spouse to title, that is never an issue. That's a very easy step. There's no gift tax issues at all. You just simply sign a deed from the one spouse to the other spouse for a 50% ownership interest. That's a very quick and easy process. Where it gets sticky is for individuals that maybe don't want to add their spouse for whatever reason, the title officially, but it is still their homestead. Well, even if they're not on the actual vesting deed as a record owner, they still have, as long as it's their homestead, a community property homestead interest. So that spouse has a right to be in that property.
And that is a unique thing to Texas, not just Texas, but it is one
Correct.
of the states that is a community property state where this matters.
And so the community estate, which is the husband and wife, their community estate can only have one homestead. So the husband can't have a homestead and the wife have another. That's not possible. But the community estate has the one homestead. So even if you don't add your spouse to title, should you go and obtain a mortgage loan, they're still going to have to sign the mortgage itself. In Texas, we refer to it as a deed of trust. They're going to have to sign that. They may not be obligated to pay the debt, but they're still going to have to sign to subordinate their homestead rights as a spouse.
This comes into play a lot of people moving in from other states because it's a hotbed, and all of a sudden they're just coming into closing and they don't know. And with us, we tell them a lot, but we have to tell them multiple times, like, your spouse has to be here.
Right.
You can't just sign. They have to sign at least one document, or we have to do a mail out.
Correct. And it is something that's unique, and it's not waivable. It's a constitutional right of a spouse, and it is not waivable for any reason.
Let's talk quickly about non-spouses, because we do have some like parents or kids that are helping their parents through a purchase of a home, but they know that they're buying it for their parents, but their parents kind of want to leave it to them, and they're like, well, we think the best way for us to make sure we have a part of this is to be added to title. One, can that happen before the loan closes or with closing? Two, if it happens after closing, what's the process and the cost and the pros and cons?
Yeah, so it's a big question.
It's like 4 questions.
Yeah, there's a lot of options to it, and some of it's going to depend on the net worth of the individuals involved. But the short and sweet of it is that the best way to deal with future death issues is by a will. That's by far and away the most effective way of dealing with it, in my opinion. Now, a will only is valuable after you die and it's probated. So, you have to keep that in mind. If it's a situation to where we need to avoid probate for some reason, which no one should be scared of probate, it's not as intense in Texas as it is in other states. It's not that expensive. But if you want to avoid probate, the kids could potentially buy the home in the name of the parents, and then after closing, the parents could convey 100% interest in that property to their child that helped them buy it, and then reserve a life estate. Okay, the life estate will give mom and dad the present possessory interest in the property, which means they can live there. Nobody can kick them out. But when they die, that life estate lapses. It goes away. And so then the child is the sole owner of the property at that point in time. Now, that's different than a joint tenancy because you don't want you don't want to treat them as joint tenants, because then it may not make sense from estate planning, because then what if that child dies first? Then it's going to go up to the parents. And if that's not your intent, that's probably not a good solution.
So you're saying that is done in the confines of a will, setting up the will that would do that, and also, but that would add them to title. You would suggest they get added to title afterwards and put their parents in give them a life estate.
Yeah, it would mainly be a deal to where I'd have to know specifically what they wanted as an outcome, and I would ask questions like, well, what happens if you die first or you die first? I mean, what do you want to have happen?
Yeah.
And then what if you guys all die together on a trip? What happens to the home? And that's why a lot of times it's better to use a will, because you can be a lot more descriptive in it.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're doing the life estate deed, like I talked about as an alternative to the will, then that's something that might be a little bit more difficult to specify what happens if everybody dies at the same time. The most valuable thing for a will is to keep your family from fighting. If you love your family, do a will, specify where you want everything to go, make it very clear. My preference is for people to use an attorney. And the reason for that is that I think LegalZoom can be a problem, because what they do is they ask you questions that you may not understand, but they also don't ask you questions that you may need to be asked. So if you go through the LegalZoom process, you'll find the number of questions they will ask could be far less than the number of questions an attorney would ask you. And the reasoning behind that is we're trying to identify exactly what you want to have happen, not just be a one-size-fits-all.